Prosecutors say his target was Danishka Sibaja Mejia. She was raped and killed in April of 2024, and prosecutors say her killer forced the young woman to snort a cocktail of deadly drugs until she passed out and died.
Today in court, Mejia's parents shared their memories of their daughter and the daily nightmare they continue to live.
Danishka Sibaja Mejia, a vibrant 22-year-old originally from Costa Rica, was known for her passion for dance and volleyball. Her life, full of promise, was tragically cut short in April 2024. Danishka Sibaja Mejia reported her rape to Knoxville Police on April 3, 2024. She did not hesitate or hide in fear. Instead, she walked into the police station and gave officers the name of her rapist, Latawyne Osborne, a former friend. She told them she had fallen asleep at his house after a night of socializing and drinking, only to wake up to the horrifying realization that he had sexually assaulted her while she was unconscious. Police took her report seriously and immediately opened an investigation. They arranged for a rape kit and preserved the evidence she provided. Danishka, despite being visibly shaken and traumatized, gave a detailed statement and did everything the law required. She trusted the system to protect her, but as she left the station that day, she did not know her courage had placed her in even greater danger. The next day, on April 4th, Osborne found out that Danishka had reported him. Rather than accept responsibility, he became enraged. Fueled by a need to silence her, Osborne gathered 2 accomplices and planned a violent retaliation. He knew where Danishka was staying, and under the cover of darkness, he drove to a house on Gilbert Lane in Knoxville to find her. His goal was clear: eliminate the witness. Osborne and his associates broke into the home around 3:30 a.m. They stormed inside with weapons, terrorizing the people present. They didn't come to argue or threaten. They came prepared to kill. One of the residents inside, attempting to defend the home, fired a gun and shot Osborne in the arm. But even wounded, Osborne remained focused on Danishka. He found her and dragged her into the basement. Inside that basement, Osborne took control of the situation with horrifying cruelty. He forced Danishka to ingest a combination of substances, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and other drugs, at gunpoint. He recorded her suffering, showing no remorse or hesitation. While she begged for her life, he filmed her final moments, creating a video of her forced overdose. His goal was not only to kill her, but to degrade her completely. Osborne made sure the drugs would take effect before leaving the scene. Danishka's body remained in that basement until law enforcement found her later. Emergency responders arrived, but they could not save her. She was already dead. Her body bore evidence of the drug cocktail she had been forced to consume. Her death wasn't an accident. It was a methodical execution disguised as an overdose. After fleeing the scene, Osborne sought medical help for his gunshot wound. That decision led to his downfall. Medical personnel quickly became suspicious of the nature of his injury, and police took him into custody. Investigators pieced together the events using security footage, witness statements, and the damning video Osborne had recorded. They had overwhelming evidence to charge him with murder. Eventually, Osborne pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, aggravated rape, and kidnapping. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The evidence against him was brutal and undeniable. He had documented the entire act. The video, discovered during the investigation, showed not only what he did, but how deliberately he did it. He showed no concern for the law or for Danishka's life. Danishka's death sent shockwaves through her community. Friends and family who knew her described her as full of life, joyful, and courageous. She did everything right. She reported her assault, followed legal procedures, and sought help from the authorities. But in the end, her bravery cost her everything. Osborne made the decision to kill her simply because she told the truth. This event remains a chilling reminder of the danger survivors face when they speak up. Danishka's story is not just a crime story, it is a call for action. It reveals the urgency of protecting victims who come forward and the necessity of swift legal intervention. Danishka deserved safety, dignity, and justice. Instead, she was silenced by a man who saw her strength as a threat.
3 men are accused of murder and rape, all connected to the killing of a 22-year-old Knoxville woman. Danishka Mejia was killed Friday at a home in South Knoxville, just one day after reporting she'd been raped by one of the men now accused in her murder.
Police describe her death as heinous. They have yet to release just how she died, but 10 News reporter Krista Lucas joining us with the very latest on this investigation. Krista?
John Robin, right now 4 people are charged in this case. Latawyne Osborne and 2 other men are accused of raping Danishka Mejia the day she was killed. Osborne's mother, Angela Greenberg, also is accused of tampering with evidence. Records show it wasn't the only attack on Mejia. Days before she was killed, she reported Osborne had raped her in his home. According to police records, on Monday, April 1st, Osborne picked up Mejia from work, took her to his home on Walker Street, where she told police she took 2 shots of liquor and blacked out. The report says she woke up the next day and noticed something was wrong. She told police on April 4th she was raped, and then the next day police found Mejia dead on the basement floor of a home on Gilbert Lane in South Knoxville. On the day she was found dead, 2 other people were found at the Gilbert Lane home suffering gunshot wounds. Separately, Osborne went to UT Medical Center for treatment from a shooting.
Chris, this week, the Knox County Grand Jury returned a 49-count indictment against those 4 people.
Yes, Robin. Those counts include aggravated burglary and kidnapping. The documents also say Osborne and co-defendant Edward Wilson are known members of a gang that has committed crimes for years.
And that is a large number of counts. We'll see where this case goes. Krista, thank you. And we're learning more about how that victim died. Police said in a briefing Wednesday they don't think it was from a gunshot. So we appreciate your reporting, Krista.
And our team coverage does continue at this point as we work to learn more about the woman police say was murdered. 10 News reporter Maria Guzman joins us from the newsroom with what she has learned about this young victim. Maria.
Yes, John Robin, we're still working to piece together information about the victim. As of right now, we know very few details about her. We just learned that Danishka attended the Carter High School. A former coach of hers says she played volleyball all 4 years there. We know she was 22 years old. Friends and loved ones knew her as Tita, and messages of Danishka's have been pouring in Spanish and English on social media. Now, friends of her are honoring her life tonight. They will be holding a memorial at 7:30 tonight at Victor Ashe Park, and we will bring you more details in her life tonight at 11.
Danishka Sibaja Mejia lived a life filled with energy, purpose, and promise. Born and raised in Costa Rica, she grew up surrounded by family, culture, and the warmth of a close-knit community. From a young age, Danishka stood out, not just for her beauty, but for her confidence, her ambition, and her unmistakable drive to succeed. She loved volleyball and dancing, often using both as ways to express herself and connect with others. Friends described her as spirited and determined, always seeking ways to improve herself and inspire those around her. She didn't settle for average. Danishka pushed herself academically and creatively. She dreamed of more than what her immediate environment could offer, and she set her sights on the United States, where she believed she could build a better life. With courage and determination, she made the move to Knoxville, Tennessee, eager to start a new chapter. For many young women, such a step would be daunting, but Danishka embraced it as an opportunity to grow and challenge herself. In Knoxville, she quickly found her footing. She formed friendships, enrolled in school, and began carving out a path toward independence. Her Costa Rican roots remained close to her heart, but she was fully committed to embracing her new home. She stayed in regular contact with her family, especially her mother, sharing her experiences and dreams. Her goal was to not only succeed for herself, but to make her loved ones proud. Danishka made a strong impression on those who met her in Tennessee. She carried herself with grace and self-respect, always treating others with kindness. Her magnetic personality allowed her to build a supportive circle, whether she was attending class, volunteering, or just socializing. She brought light into every room she entered. People gravitated toward her, sensing the strength and warmth she naturally carried. She had plans, big ones. Danishka wanted to complete her studies, travel, and eventually return home with skills and knowledge that could help others. She believed in living fully and authentically. Those close to her often said she had a fire in her spirit. She wasn't someone who took shortcuts or stayed silent when something felt wrong. This inner strength would define her final days, though no one could have predicted how soon her life would be taken from her. Despite being in a foreign country, Danishka handled challenges with maturity. Language barriers, cultural differences, and homesickness didn't stop her. If anything, they motivated her. She kept her eyes on her goals and worked hard to achieve them. She held onto her values, maintained her integrity, and never allowed difficult moments to define her. Her optimism remained intact, even when faced with adversity. Her courage didn't just show in her dreams. It showed in how she treated others. Danishka supported her peers and offered guidance when someone needed a friend. She didn't hesitate to stand up for what was right, even when it made her uncomfortable. Her bravery wasn't loud or boastful. It was steady and consistent. It's what made her decision to report her assault so true to who she was. She simply couldn't allow injustice to go unanswered.
Prosecutors say his target was Danishka Sibaja Mejia. She was raped and killed in April of 2024, and prosecutors say her killer forced the young woman to snort a cocktail of deadly drugs until she passed out and died.
Today in court, Mejia's parents shared their memories of their daughter and the daily nightmare they continue to live. We also heard from one survivor who was there the night Mejia was murdered.
For me, it was honoring my daughter. She knew I was always strong. I always had her back. And although she's not here, I still can't let her down. I never would. So I had to put all that behind me today and take a stand for her and be her voice.
Again, the convicted killer is expected to never leave prison. Tonight on 10 News at 11, we will hear more from the parents of that young victim about whether this sentence does feel like justice.
In the days leading up to the tragedy, Danishka was still looking forward. She had plans for the summer and had shared with friends ideas for travel and new projects. There was no sign she feared what was coming. She lived with the assumption that justice would protect her. She believed in the system, and more importantly, she believed in her right to be heard. Her willingness to report her attacker came from the same place that fueled her ambition, her belief in doing the right thing. Her family, thousands of miles away in Costa Rica, remained proud of her journey. They supported her decisions and encouraged her to chase her dreams. When they received the news of her death, their world collapsed. Danishka had represented hope, not just for herself, but for all those who watched her make bold moves and rise above limitations. Her murder shattered that vision in the cruelest way possible. Danishka's life was more than the tragedy that ended it. It was a life that inspired others and offered a glimpse of what is possible when someone dares to dream. She embodied resilience, hope, and the power of voice. Chapter 1 of her story is not about how she died. It is about how she lived, and how, even in death, her courage speaks louder than ever. Danishka Sibaja Mejia had trusted Latawyne Osborne. They weren't strangers. He was someone she had known, someone she considered a friend, or at the very least, someone she didn't fear. That made the betrayal all the more brutal. On the night of April 2nd, 2024, Danishka spent time with Osborne at his home in Knoxville. She had no reason to suspect what was coming. They drank and talked, and at some point, Danishka fell asleep, vulnerable and unaware. While she lay unconscious, Osborne made the decision to violate her in the worst possible way. When she woke up the next morning, Danishka knew something was wrong. Her body ached, her clothing was disturbed, and Osborne's behavior had shifted. She confronted him, but he denied everything. Still, Danishka trusted her instincts. She understood that something terrible had happened, and she refused to ignore it. Instead of staying silent, she made the courageous choice to seek justice. She went straight to the Knoxville Police Department to report what had happened. At the station, Danishka sat down with investigators and gave a detailed statement. She named Osborne as her rapist. She explained the events of the previous night, described how she had fallen asleep, and what she suspected he had done. The officers listened carefully and opened a case immediately. A rape kit was ordered, and evidence was collected. Despite the fear and trauma she must have been feeling, Danishka remained strong. She wanted to ensure that Osborne was held accountable. For survivors of sexual assault, the process of reporting can be almost as traumatic as the event itself. There are questions, invasive procedures, and the possibility of being disbelieved. But Danishka didn't let that stop her. She understood the importance of her voice and believed that speaking out was the right thing to do. Her bravery stood in direct contrast to the cowardice of the man who had hurt her. She refused to protect him with her silence. Her report triggered an official investigation. Detectives reviewed her statement, began searching for supporting evidence, and looked into Osborne's background. It was a textbook example of how the justice system is supposed to function. But what no one expected was how quickly the situation would turn deadly. The very next day, Osborne found out that Danishka had gone to the police. Rather than flee or deny the accusation, he decided to take revenge. Osborne became enraged. He saw her courage not as a threat to his freedom, but as a personal insult. In his twisted view, she had humiliated him, and he believed the only way to restore control was through violence. Within hours of learning about the police report, he began planning a deadly response. He enlisted the help of 2 others and plotted to track down Danishka and silence her permanently. While Danishka was likely trying to return to some sense of normalcy after the emotional toll of reporting the assault, Osborne was preparing for murder. He knew where she was staying. He knew she was vulnerable. He chose to act in the dead of night, hoping to avoid detection. His intentions were clear. This wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. It was a calculated plan to erase the woman who had dared to hold him accountable. On April 4th, just one day after Danishka had walked into that police station, Osborne followed through with his plan. He forced his way into the house where she was staying, wounded by gunfire in the process, but undeterred. He located Danishka, dragged her into the basement, and began the horrific series of actions that would lead to her death. The assault she had survived became the prelude to a far more violent and permanent crime. The very act of reporting her rape had placed Danishka in mortal danger. It's a chilling reality that too many survivors face: the fear of retaliation, the fear of not being believed, the fear of losing everything for daring to speak. Danishka was one of the brave ones. She didn't stay silent. She didn't let fear stop her. But the system that should have protected her didn't act quickly enough to prevent what came next. Danishka's decision to report Osborne was an act of immense courage. It was rooted in self-respect, justice, and a belief in right over wrong. That choice should have marked the beginning of her healing. Instead, it became the trigger for a calculated murder. This chapter of her story exposes the deep failures in how society protects survivors and highlights the terrifying lengths to which some predators will go to escape accountability. In the early hours of April 4th, 2024, Latawyne Osborne arrived at the home where Danishka Sibaja Mejia was staying. It wasn't a random visit. It was the conclusion of a plan fueled by anger, entitlement, and revenge. Osborne knew exactly what he was going to do. After learning that Danishka had reported him for rape the day before, he couldn't accept the idea of being held accountable. Instead of turning himself in or denying the allegation through legal means, he chose violence. With a gun in hand and accomplices by his side, he forced his way into the residence. As he entered, a confrontation unfolded. One of the occupants of the home was armed and tried to stop Osborne. A gunfight broke out. Osborne was shot during the exchange, injured, but still able to continue. The fact that he was wounded didn't stop him. Bleeding and enraged, he pressed forward, driven by a single, monstrous goal: to find Danishka and kill her. He stormed into the basement, where she had been hiding, and what followed was an act of brutality so severe it shocked even the most seasoned investigators. In the basement, Osborne found Danishka. She was cornered, frightened, and likely confused by how quickly things had escalated. Instead of backing down, Osborne became more violent. He beat her with a metal pole, attacked her with broken glass, and used a machete to inflict devastating wounds. The attack wasn't just murder, it was torture. Investigators later described it as sadistic. Danishka died on that basement floor, her body battered and mutilated, her voice silenced forever. Osborne didn't act alone. He had two accomplices, Ashley Rhea and Eric Nichols, who participated in the invasion and played a role in the horror that unfolded. Whether they directly harmed Danishka or simply stood by and enabled the violence, They too shared responsibility in her death. What began as a report of rape had now escalated into a grisly homicide that left a young woman's promising life destroyed and a community shaken. After the murder, Osborne didn't get far. Despite his injuries, he fled the scene, but law enforcement quickly tracked him down. His attempt to escape justice failed. He was arrested and hospitalized due to his gunshot wounds. Police also arrested Rhea and Nichols. The trio now faced multiple felony charges, including first-degree murder, aggravated rape, aggravated burglary, and tampering with evidence. The brutality of the crime ensured it would not be overlooked. Knoxville Police and prosecutors moved quickly. They understood the weight of the case, not just its violence, but what it represented. A young immigrant woman had trusted the justice system. She had reported her rapist, and instead of being protected, she was murdered less than 24 hours later. Her death became a rallying cry for advocates, lawyers, and lawmakers who saw in her story the failures of a system meant to safeguard survivors. In court documents, prosecutors laid bare the gruesome details. They described how Danishka was beaten so badly with the metal pole that it bent from the force. They noted the broken glass used to slash her, the machete wounds, the blood that soaked the concrete floor. This was no crime of passion. It was a deliberate, drawn-out execution meant to punish a woman for daring to speak the truth. Osborne's actions weren't impulsive. They were premeditated and fueled by a violent need to control and silence. As the legal process moved forward, Danishka's family struggled to cope with the enormity of their loss. From Costa Rica, her mother spoke out through tears, calling her daughter a warrior and demanding justice. Her community in Knoxville mourned as well. Vigils were held, candles lit, and posters with Danishka's smiling face plastered across memorials. She had come to the United States in search of opportunity and safety. She had found neither. Advocacy groups seized on Danishka's case to highlight the dangers faced by survivors of sexual violence. They called for stronger protections for women who report rape, faster response times from police, and legal reforms that prioritize survivor safety. Danishka's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a call to action. Her bravery in speaking out, even in the face of fear, became a symbol of resistance against a culture of silence and retaliation. Though Danishka is gone, the fight for justice continues. Osborne, Rhea, and Nichols now face the consequences of their actions. The courtroom may offer some closure, but it will never erase the pain of a life stolen so violently. What remains is Danishka's legacy, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, truth must be told, and that no one should be punished for having the courage to speak it. News of Danishka Sibaja Mejia's brutal murder spread quickly, igniting a wave of public outrage. The horror of her death and the circumstances surrounding it, her reporting a rape only to be murdered the very next day, sent shockwaves through Knoxville and beyond. Social media platforms erupted with messages of grief, anger, and disbelief. People couldn't understand how a young woman who sought help from the justice system ended up dead, punished for her bravery. Hashtags bearing her name began to trend, and her story was shared thousands of times as people demanded answers and accountability. Vigils were held across Tennessee. At each one, candles were lit, Danishka's photo held up by mourners, and moments of silence observed. In Knoxville, a particularly emotional gathering saw friends, neighbors, and complete strangers come together to honor the life she had lived and the dreams she never got to fulfill. Her name became more than just a headline. It became a symbol for every woman who had ever been silenced, shamed, or harmed for telling the truth. Women's rights groups and survivor advocacy organizations rallied behind Danishka's story. They held press conferences, issued statements, and launched petitions demanding better protections for rape victims. One message resonated above all. Danishka did everything right. She followed the law. She trusted the authorities, and she took steps to ensure her assailant would be brought to justice. Yet, instead of safety, she met a violent end. This stark reality enraged many and fueled the call for reform. Immigrant rights activists also spoke out. Danishka had come to the United States from Costa Rica in search of opportunity, a better future, and personal freedom. She was learning English, working, and dreaming of bigger things. Her story became emblematic of the vulnerability so many immigrants face, often navigating systems that failed to protect them adequately. The fact that she died after reporting a crime only amplified concerns about systemic shortcomings, especially for marginalized communities. Public officials couldn't stay silent. The mayor of Knoxville called the murder a tragedy beyond words and vowed to support reforms that would better protect survivors. Some members of the Tennessee General Assembly began discussing legislative measures to create emergency protective actions following sexual assault reports. Law enforcement agencies came under scrutiny, with questions raised about what more could have been done in the 24 hours between Danishka's report and her death. Danishka's family, still in Costa Rica, became part of the global outcry. Her mother, in a tearful statement, called her daughter a light extinguished too soon and demanded that the people responsible for her death be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Her family's grief became part of the broader conversation. How justice should not only be reactive, but also preventive. They didn't just want convictions. They wanted systemic change. In the wake of the tragedy, a fund was created in Danishka's name to support survivors of sexual violence. The goal was twofold: to offer direct assistance to women in danger and to advocate for legislative change. The initiative, led by grassroots organizers in Knoxville, quickly gained momentum. Survivors began sharing their own stories of fear and retaliation, creating a chorus of voices that echoed Danishka's courage. Media outlets continued covering the case, not just to report court developments, but to shine a light on the broader issues it raised. Editorials in local and national newspapers demanded justice, not just for Danishka, but for all the women who had been failed by the system. Journalists delved into the criminal histories of Osborne and his accomplices, revealing warning signs and previous offenses that, if taken more seriously, might have prevented the murder. Educators and community leaders began including Danishka's story in school and university programs about consent, reporting, and gender-based violence. Her life and death served as a case study in both tragedy and strength, a reminder of the price too many women pay for seeking justice. Though she had been silenced, her story continued to speak, to provoke, and to inspire change. In the end, Danishka's legacy was not just about how she died, but how she lived. She was a fighter, a dreamer, and a young woman who refused to be silenced. Her courage exposed the cracks in the system and compelled others to step forward. As the legal battle continued in court, the battle for lasting reform pressed on outside. Danishka's name became more than a memory. It became a movement, one demanding that no one else suffer for choosing truth over silence. As the shock from Danishka Sibaja Mejia's murder settled into a painful reality, the criminal justice system began the slow and methodical process of prosecution. Latawyne Osborne, the man accused of both raping and killing her, was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated rape, aggravated burglary, and multiple other felonies. His accomplices, Ashley Rhea and Eric Nichols, faced similar charges for their roles in the deadly home invasion. For Danishka's family and the public, the courtroom became a place not just of legal reckoning, but of emotional catharsis. Prosecutors painted a harrowing picture of the crime. They detailed how Osborne, enraged by Danishka's bravery in reporting the rape, orchestrated the ambush less than 24 hours later. The court heard how he entered the home with violent intent, how he was shot during the break-in but still continued his savage attack, and how he brutally beat and mutilated Danishka in what investigators called one of the most sadistic murders they had ever seen. Each testimony added weight to the horror that had already shocked the community. In pretrial hearings, Osborne's defense team tried to raise questions about the sequence of events and the level of involvement of the other suspects. But the overwhelming physical evidence, including forensic reports, surveillance footage, witness statements, and Osborne's own injuries, left little doubt about the brutality and intent behind the crime. The prosecution remained steadfast in its commitment to seek the harshest possible penalties for everyone involved. Danishka's family, though devastated, remained deeply involved in the proceedings. They appeared in court when possible and offered emotional impact statements that brought many in the room to tears. Through translators and advocates, her mother spoke about her daughter's dreams, the courage it took to report her attacker, and the cruel irony of her being killed for doing what was right. Her words echoed through the courtroom like a plea for justice not just for her daughter, but for every silenced victim. Public interest in the trial remained high. Every development in the case was followed closely by media outlets, legal experts, and advocacy groups. The story had gone beyond Knoxville. It had become a national discussion about victim protection, the rights of immigrants, and the urgent need to ensure that those who report sexual violence are safe from retaliation. Danishka's name was now etched into the growing call for justice reform in America. As the legal process moved forward, policymakers in Tennessee began to take action. Some proposed legislation that would require immediate protective measures following a rape report, such as expedited restraining orders and emergency housing. Others called for better coordination between law enforcement agencies and victim services. Danishka's case had become a driving force for change, her death forcing lawmakers to confront failures that could no longer be ignored. Meanwhile, the Danishka Sibaja Mejia Foundation, established by her supporters, began offering scholarships to immigrant women pursuing education in the United States. It also launched outreach programs aimed at educating young people about consent, legal rights, and survivor support services. Though her life had been stolen, her spirit found new purpose in the causes she unknowingly ignited. Eventually, the court handed down its verdict. Latawyne Osborne was convicted on all major charges, including first-degree murder and aggravated rape. The judge, in his ruling, described the crime as inhuman, deliberate, and devoid of mercy. Osborne received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Rhea and Nichols were also found guilty and sentenced accordingly, though their exact roles and levels of involvement continued to be debated in court and among the public. Even with the legal victory, the wound left behind remained fresh. No conviction could bring Danishka back. For her family, friends, and supporters, the courtroom victory was only partial solace. But there was a collective understanding that justice had been served, and that her killer would never harm another person again. It was a grim comfort, but a necessary one. The road ahead is long, but the legacy of Danishka Sibaja Mejia continues to guide it. Her story reshaped conversations around survivor safety and inspired real action in both policy and community support. Though she did not live to see the changes her courage would spark, her voice, once silenced by violence, now echoes through new laws, stronger protections, and the lives of those she inspires. Her name is not forgotten, and her story is far from over. Danishka Sibaja Mejia came to America with hope in her heart. Like many before her, she believed this land offered a better future, a place where hard work, courage, and honesty would be enough to build a new life. She dreamed of mastering English, finding meaningful work, and eventually becoming a citizen. Those dreams were not just hers, but part of a shared human yearning for safety, opportunity, and dignity. And in many ways, she was living them, until evil found her door. Her story is one of tragic contrast. On one hand, it is a tale of strength, a young woman who had the courage to report a sexual assault, to speak truth in the face of fear. On the other hand, it is a chilling reminder of the dangers that survivors of violence still face, especially when systems meant to protect them fall short. Danishka did everything right. She trusted the law, reached out for help, and stood up against her attacker. But her trust was met not with security, but with silence, then brutality. The circumstances of her murder were so horrific that they stunned even seasoned law enforcement officials. The details of her final hours, the forced entry, the savage beating, the horrific mutilation, etched themselves into public memory. But behind the gruesome headlines was a real person, a daughter, a friend, a neighbor. Danishka wasn't just a victim. She was a vibrant life, extinguished too soon by the very evil she tried to escape. In the months that followed her death, Danishka became a symbol of broken systems, yes, but also of resilience and resistance. The public outcry that followed was unlike anything Knoxville had seen in years. Her name echoed in rallies, legislative chambers, and candlelight vigils. People demanded not just accountability for her killers, but transformation of the structures that failed her. Her courage became a rallying point for activists, lawmakers, and survivors alike. The legal convictions brought a measure of justice, but they did not offer closure. True justice, many argued, would be found not in sentencing alone, but in the creation of laws and resources that ensure no other woman meets the same fate. Danishka's death was senseless, but not in vain. Her story awakened the conscience of a community and lit the fire for long overdue change. In her name, initiatives were born. Her memory fueled foundations, scholarships, and advocacy campaigns. Survivors who had once stayed silent now felt empowered to speak. Communities came together to offer better support systems for victims of violence, especially immigrants, who are too often left isolated in times of crisis. Schools and workplaces began holding forums about consent, protection, and the duty to believe and defend those who come forward. Though gone, Danishka's spirit lingers in these actions. Every policy change, every protected survivor, every woman who feels seen and safe because of her story is part of her legacy. The world she hoped for, a world where courage is not punished, is still being built. Her name is not merely etched in stone or written on protest signs. It is alive in every life, touched by her bravery. Her mother once said, "My daughter was not weak, she was a warrior." And she was right. Danishka fought not just in her final days, but in every choice she made to live boldly and speak bravely. Her light, though violently extinguished, has sparked many others, and through them, she continues to shine. As the years go by, Danishka Sibaja Mejia's story will remain a solemn reminder of the price of silence and the power of voice. It calls on us all to listen, to act, and to protect. In honoring her memory, we commit to building a society where survivors are heard, believed, and shielded from further harm. That is the road ahead. And for Danishka, it is the legacy she so fiercely earned. Her life was brief, but her impact is eternal. If you've been impacted by Danishka Sibaja Mejia's story, like this video so that more people can see it. Share with someone you love, and hit the subscribe button to never miss cases like this.